Sir, if you don't mind my saying, I'm a little concerned. I've seen you go through similar phases in 2016 and 2012 and 2008 and 2005 and 1997 and 1995 and 1992 and 1989 and that weird one in 1966.
Look, Batman's been on the job for a very, 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 very long time.
He has aged phenomenally.
Hey, howdy, hey, Bat family, Wolfman Forcer and Dash here. Some time ago I reviewed the Superman films because at the time the newly released Superman film came out, the one directed by James Gunn, which starts the DCU. So I thought, as it only is fair and makes sense, I should also do a Let's Talk about Batman's films, TV shows, video games, and other things, which I'm going to do today. Now, going into this, I knew there was going to be a lot of Batman things, and I wanted to make sure that I did more than just the stuff I had already seen at the time, which I did for Superman. But what I didn't realise is that there would be just so many things to do with Batman. Like, it's not just strictly Batman; it's also things that are sort of spin-offs to Batman, focused on on the rest of his other characters. Yeah, so this is probably going to be quite a very long vlog, but I will try my best to sort of try and summarise everything as best as I can. Everything that I'm going to go through on the list I've got on my other screen is stuff that I've seen, played, and or listened to, and it's TV shows, films, video games, and radio dramas. And I decided to also do radio dramas this time because radio dramas are a thing that I keep hearing lots of praise about, and it's a very underrated kind of form of media. Not many people are familiar or are aware of it. And I think one of the great things about that is that you can listen to it. You don't actually have to pay attention to a TV. You can just listen to it as background noise and crack on with other things as you listen to it. And it has got me thinking of maybe subscribing to Audible at some point, just because it's so good. So I'm not going to waste any more time rambling on. I'm just going to crack on with it. So, and I'm probably going to be proving one of my friends wrong, because one of my friends keeps thinking that Batman started with Adam West, and I'm like, no, it didn't start like that at all. Obviously, Batman started in comics. I'm not going to go through the comics in this video, and I don't know if I ever will, because there's just so many comics. But a lot of these stuff that I'm going to be talking about today are based on quite a few of the Batman comics, and even some being strictly based on just the one. So yeah, but anyway, so let's start off with the 1943 serial, which was released during the time where no one really had television screens. They had to go to the theatre to watch films, and sort of short films, I guess you could call it. And the 1943 serial is I believe, and if I remember this correctly, a 15-part serial in which it's black and white, and it's basically Batman and Robin fighting crime. And I think, as I remember from watching it, is basically a 15-part story from beginning to end. And I thought it was okay. Obviously, because of the time that it was made in, the costumes are going to look inferior to the costumes we get today, and other things as well. But I remember thinking it was okay. I'm not really sure if it was my cup of tea, because I didn't really enjoy it as I thought I would. But it did kind of establish the style of Batman for a while, and I did kind of find a little bit of enjoyment in it. So I'll be fair to it, and I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Which brings us on to the 1949 serial, which obviously came 6 years later. This one was called Batman and Robin, and from what I remember of this, I only saw 2 episodes, because the way I was watching these two serials, and I'm not going to explain which way I did them for reasons. This one I only saw 2 episodes. I don't remember it that well, other than that the opening was different, and they do the marching ant kind of thing, which I do kind of like the sort of non-singing version of, because it's kind of an epic kind of kind of song. Last time I heard that was in Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I believe was the third Die Hard. But yeah, we're not talking about Die Hard, we're talking about Batman. So for the 1949 seal, because it's just 2 episodes, I'm gonna give the 2 episodes that I've seen a slightly higher 7 out of 10, because I did enjoy them a little bit more. Now we come to the first of the radio dramas, which is Mystery Club, and honestly, I don't remember Mystery Club all that well, because when I was doing all this, watching and listening to all this Batman stuff, I felt the need to sort of have multiple things on at once, and one of them was Mystery Club, which is a 15-minute audio drama, and I don't remember it all that well, so I'm just going to be fair to it, and I'll give it a 5 out of 10, because I don't remember it that well. But one thing I do remember that well, and I know I'll probably get a lot of hate if I forget to talk about it, is Batman 1966. You know what this is. It's the Adam West and Burt Ward Batman series. You know, all the usual shenanigans. It's camp, corny, it's fun, and it's pretty much as iconic as you can get with the opening theme, the sort of pow and all that and everything. It's basically the sort of classic Batman comic books coming to life on screen with all the campness and so forth and everything. And I get the appeal that people have for it, and honestly, I do actually like it because of the purpose of it and everything, and I think it is really good, and it definitely made Batman popular in that sort of style for a very long time. So I'm going to give the TV series a 9 out of 10. I think the reason why I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10 is because obviously nowadays people treat Batman much more seriously. So in a way it's kind of inferior now, but at the time, but it's still very iconic and very memorable and well known. So yeah. And just like with most TV shows, it of course got its own feature film, and usually with most feature films based on TV shows, it's either the finale of a show or an attempt to bring the show to the big screen, even though they're going to continue on anyway. And I think with this one, it was really just I guess you could say it was a final hurrah, but because it was released the same year that the TV series started, I'm kind of thinking maybe they thought that it was only going to be one season and they weren't going to have another film. But anyway, so in the film, all of Batman's enemies unite to take away the world nation people, put them into bottles and everything, and it's up to Batman and Robin to save them and stop the villains from their plans. And yeah, it's as hilarious and as over the top as you can get, as it should be with a feature length version of Adam West and Burt Ward's Batman. So yeah, and yeah, I thought it was good fun, this one. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 for sure. So the next thing I saw was Adventures of Batman and the New Adventures of Batman, a title that's going to age like fine wine for sure, because when you put new in the title, it's obviously not going to be new for long, so just calling it new just doesn't feel right to me. It just feels like it's going to get old very quickly. But anyway, so this is basically an animated version of Adam West's Batman sort of story, because Adam West is back. But it's also kind of treated as if it was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, or definitely has that style to it, and I think it was actually made by Hanna-Barbera as well. So every episode would start with Batman introducing the show, and you get all these weird characters and so forth. And if you're very familiar with Scooby-Doo, Flintstones, and the rest of Hanna-Barbera's like iconic characters, then this is pretty much going to be very familiar to you as well. And I did find some enjoyment in it, and it kind of is a bit silly, sometimes makes no sense and everything, but it's as Hanna-Barbera as you're going to get, and it's good fun. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Which brings us on to The Lazarus Syndrome, which is another audio drama, which I do remember a little better, but not that much better. And as I understand, this was the BBC Radio 4 Batman story that was an audio drama. And as you'd expect from most audio dramas, this is the sort of audio drama that has what's known as the BBC English, in which people talk with a British accent, and it's very posh, very posh and everything. so yeah. So Yeah, I don't remember Lazarus Syndrome all that well, apart from the fact that it was made by the BBC. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. So yeah. Now on to the next most iconic Batman thing, which is of course the 1989 Batman film, simply known as Batman. So this one is obviously the first of Tim Burton's 2 films that he made, and it kind of establishes Batman as a more serious, more sort of darker, mature kind of character. But it's definitely in the style of Tim Burton's films, and anyone that thinks that they've not seen their Tim Burton's Batman films, this is as close as you're going to get to having a Batman film. It's made by him because it's definitely his style, because, you know, Gotham's very gothic, and obviously Tim Burton's a very gothic kind of filmmaker. And you get Michael Keaton's playing Batman, who previously had played Beetlejuice and did a lot of comedy roles before doing this. So this is kind of his first serious role, if you want to call it a serious role. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty good film. Really good film. It does change things from the traditional origins, where instead of Joe Chill, it's the Joker that kills his parents, which kind of makes it a bit more personal, because obviously the Joker is a typical criminal that Batman has to deal with. But this film kind of makes it more personal, because obviously the Joker and Batman feel that they are incomplete without each other. So having Joker kill his parents just feels right. And Jack Nicholson plays the Joker here, and he plays the Joker really well, though I do kind of question whether he's having to have a permanent smile on all the time, or if that's actual makeup, because it looks like he's just smiling all the time, and that's gotta hurt for sure. So yeah, so I'm gonna give Batman 1989 a 9 out of 10. Which brings us on to Batman Returns, the sequel to the film, and as I have heard, this was meant to be another one of those films that had a lot of tie-in toys and everything, but because of how dark and mature the film was, lots of companies decided to leave all that behind, and for good reason, because this is actually a very dark and mature kind of franchise. And I think at the time, Warner Bros. Were not exactly keen on having a very dark and mature Batman, because they weren't too sure if people would actually like it or not. This film, I think lots of people liked it, and I do kind of like how they sort of changed the origins of the Penguin and Catwoman. So in Penguin's case, he's not like a typical sort of high-rolling mafia guy. He's a kind of Arkham Asylum-like inmate, played by Danny DeVito. And then you got Michelle Pfeiffer playing Catwoman, who isn't your typical sort of cat burglar kind of Catwoman. She's just someone that's kind of consumed by things and everything. So yeah, and to be honest, I kind of think this film is good as well. I do remember it much more than the 1989 film, mainly because you got Christopher Walken in the film, and you know, Christopher Walken is one of those people that you don't forget about, because his roles are so Christopher Walken that any film with Christopher Walken in, you do remember him more than most other things. But I remember Danny DeVito in the film, I remember him being good in it, and Michelle Pfeiffer was also good in it as well. I think the film before it did have a lot more things going for it, but this one has things going for it as well, because I know Penguin was going to be the mayor in this film at one point, then Batman screwed up that plan. And I'm just going to check Facebook because it's flashing. There we go. So yeah, so Batman Returns, I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. And around this time, we had Batman the Animated Series. Now, anyone that's talked about Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill will have known Batman the Animated Series. This is the animated series that Bruce Timm made his DC debut. It's where a lot of the big writers of all these different cartoons and so forth made their debuts. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill make their debuts as Batman and the Joker respectively, and it's kind of the start of their special relationship, whereby anytime Kevin Conroy returns to voice Batman, Mark Hamill will join him only because it's Mark Hamill, and he refuses to work with anyone else that does the voice of Batman. Batman the Animated Series is obviously its own thing. It re-establishes different origin stories for characters. Like it It makes Two-Face to be a more tragic villain. It introduces Harley Quinn, which in this series is played by Arlene Sorkin. May she rest in peace. And it's quite dark and mature, but it's kind of tailored to a family-friendly audience, and I do kind of like it. And I actually don't have anything bad to say about it because it is one of those great animated shows. And okay, that's probably me being biased, me being a Batman fan, but it really is one of the greats out there. So I'm not going to waste any more time talking about it. I'm going to give it a perfect 10 out of 10 because it is as perfect as you can get. And it also had a feature film. In fact, not just one, 3 feature films. The first of which is Mask of the Phantasm. So I don't know where this is set in the animated series, but I know that it kind of talks about Bruce Wayne becoming Batman and one of the reasons why he became Batman, and also kind of gives an origin story to Joker as well, because he used to be a criminal and so forth. And then we have this character called the Phantasm, who is out to basically get revenge on these mafia bosses and so forth that did wrong to the person behind the mask. And yeah, I thought it was a very good Batman film, and I kind of particularly like the beginning of it, where it has a very sort of much more epic Batman theme from the DC animated universe, a very much more epic theme with the choir and so forth. And then when he actually puts the cowl on for the very first time, it's a very it's kind of like a big moment for Batman for sure. Like, it's one of those, it's just quite something. So yeah, so I'm gonna also, just for those 2 scenes, do things alone, and also just everything else to do with the film, because I really like it. I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10 as well. So next we move on to the first of the Joel Schumacher films, which is Batman Forever. Batman Forever, as we all know, is not one of the best Batman films. It's definitely not one I particularly like very much. You got Val Kilmer playing Batman this time. Tim Burton still produces it, but he's otherwise not involved in the film because Warner Brothers wanted to go a more child-friendly approach. You got Jim Carrey playing the Riddler, and I've always praised Jim Carrey for the roles he does, because to play a character like the Riddler, you do need someone that can make a lot of energy and so forth, and Jim Carrey is very good at that. David Tennant is good at that as well, but on this occasion it was Jim Carrey. Instead of the guy that played Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars films, who was also Harvey Dent in the Tim Burton films, we got Tommy Lee Jones playing Two-Face this time, who I guess is an odd choice, but okay, whatever, that's fine. And yeah, this film I don't particularly like very much. I thought it was okay. I don't think it's a strong sequel to Batman Returns, if you want to even call it a sequel, because it looks so different. I think the main issue I have, apart from the sort of close-up on bat nipples and bat butts, is this one scene where for no reason Val Kilmer's Batman decides he doesn't want to do Batman anymore, and then you got Chris O'Donnell whining like he always does, and yeah, I don't like it very much. So Batman Forever, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10, because I don't really like it. But it's certainly not as bad as this next film, which is Batman and Robin. You all know this film. George Clooney plays Batman, who is a charming Bruce Wayne, but for Batman, no, just don't agree to that. Bat nipples, bat butts, bat credit cards, yeah, nostalgia critics, insert nostalgia critic joke in there. Eva What's-Her-Face plays Poison Ivy. You got a zombie Bane, who's not really Bane. You got Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Mr. Freeze, who has the body of Mr. Freeze, but is otherwise doesn't sound. So yeah, I pretty much say everything that everyone else has said about the film. There's not really much else I can really sort of say about it. With the only redeemable quality being that because of how bad it is, it's actually funny because of how bad the film is. So it does have that thing for it, but overall it's definitely a very bad Batman film, and thank God that it was the last one of this franchise, because with the way things went with Joel Schumacher's films, I'm not that surprised that Warner Brothers didn't want to continue with the films after that. well, those films anyway. So I'm gonna give it. Yeah, I'm just gonna give it a 5 out of 10 because it is actually funny because of how bad it is. But I know that wasn't really the intention. Before we carry on, drink break because my mouth's getting dry.
Eventually.
Okay. So next, move on to the second Batman animated series feature film, which is Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. So this film was set during the time where Batman had a Robin. I think Batgirl was a thing. I don't really remember from seeing this film, and it's basically an attempt to kind of sort of redeem the Batman franchise in a way, because this also obviously stars Mr. Freeze, hence the name. And Mr. Freeze sets out to find someone of the same blood type as his wife because his wife is dying, and he happens to find out that Batgirl, or Barbara Gordon, happens to have that same blood type. So he goes and kidnaps her, and it's up to Batman and Robin to go rescue her. And it's kind of one of those rescuing kind of stories. It kind of makes out that Mr. Freeze is a tragic villain, which he is. And it's definitely a much better Batman and Mr. Freeze film than Batman and Robin is, for sure. But in terms of the animated series films, I still think the Mask of the Phantasm is a much more powerful film, because everything just works perfectly in that film. But this film is alright as well, so I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So something that's not really Batman but is a spin-off to Batman is this TV series called Birds of Prey. And just so that there's no confusion, this is separate from the film, which I'll talk about a little later on. And the TV show, it's as I understand it, is a typical sort of early 2000s sort of teen drama kind of thing. And it basically sees all these different female characters that have some connection to Batman or Catwoman coming together to fight crime and so forth. It only lasted one season, and I know on the few times that it's been had a small revival or cameo, it's only when the multiverse is under attack and so forth. So yeah, it's okay, but it is as sort of early CW as you can get, with the attractive cast, the sort of romance and action and so forth. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10. So sequel to Batman the Animated Series is Batman Beyond, and I'm just going to check that I've not missed anything. No. So Batman Beyond is set in the very far future of the DC animated universe, where all technology and so forth are about. Bruce Wayne tries to continue to be Batman, but because of how old and advanced his age has become, he ultimately decides to retire Batman because he's just isn't able to do it as well as he was able to previously. And for that reason, it then falls to a guy called Terry McGinnis, who initially takes the sort of advanced Batman suit to try and avenge his father. Bruce Wayne interferes with him because he wants the suit back, but Terry McGinnis convinces him that he's trying to get revenge on his father, and Bruce Wayne, knowing how difficult it is to lose parents to a typical criminal, decides to help him. And eventually, it kind of feels like that their partnership is just going to end there and then. But obviously, wouldn't have a series. So eventually, Bruce Wayne decides to recruit him as the new Batman, and it basically is the sense that Terry McGinnis is the new Batman. Bruce Wayne is now Alfred, but not really sort of butler. He's more sort of giving support to Terry as and when he can, and he sometimes comes out on the field himself when he needs to. And much of this series focuses on brand new villains, but occasionally does bring back other villains as well. Like I know there's a story that's focused on Bane, and other characters as well. And there is a feature film too, which I'll get to shortly. And it also had a spin-off series as well, which I'll also get to shortly. But Batman Beyond is, as you'd expect it to be, Batman in the future, although it was called Batman of the Future here in the UK. And I'm glad that it's now brought into mainstream DC stuff. So yeah. And also Terry McGinnis, in my opinion, is one of the few good-looking animated characters from Batman that I do like, as well as other characters like Harley Quinn and so forth. So anytime he's shirtless, I'm always happy. So yeah. And I forget who voices him, but he does the voice very well, very intimidating, very sort of young brute and everything. So I'm gonna give Batman Beyond a 9 out of 10 because although it is good, I still think the anime series is 10 times better, but still very good. So one of the episodes of Batman Animated Series does lead into a spin-off series called the Zeta Project, which only really had 1 or 2 seasons, and I've only seen like a handful of episodes, but it's basically about this robot, and it was probably the most original DC thing I've seen, because as far as I know, I don't think there is a robot called Zeta or Zeta in the mainstream DC, so it was nice to see something a little original. But yeah, it's a different animation style to Batman Beyond, so yeah, and I'm not really that keen on it, but I thought it was okay, so I'm gonna give it, or give the handful of episodes I've seen anyway, a 6 out of 10. Bringing us on to the Batman Beyond film, Return of the Joker, which I don't need to explain it to you. It's basically about the Joker returning to Gotham for the first time in however so many years it's been. Mark Hamill's back voicing him, and Bruce Wayne is questioning it, Barbara Gordon's questioning it, and Terry McGinnis himself is questioning it. And that film is one of the darkest and maturest of the films, because this is kind of the point where the Joker is actually the most twisted and the most monstrous that he's ever been, because he kidnaps Robin, turns him into a Joker, and it's also quite well known for having a controversial scene in which, obviously, Joker does die in this film. In this film, was implied, and there's like 2 different versions of the film, although it really only changes one scene. So originally Robin shoots Joker in the chest, and he dies from a stab in the heart. And then there's a slightly less brutal way of him being killed, where Robin pushes him into a series of pipes, and explosions happen, and he basically dies from that off screen. But yeah, it's definitely a good film, and I love how dark and mature it is. But obviously you have to be careful which version you buy, because here in the UK, the DVD and/or Blu-ray version is the version that is less brutal. But if you buy it on digital, you get the more brutal version, which is kind of weird, but I guess that's how it is. But anyway, Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker gets 9 out of 10 for sure. And then the third and final of the Batman animated series films, final sort of in the sort of canon sense, is Mystery of the Batwoman. So in this film, a bunch of Batman's villains kind of unite to do crime and so forth, and then there's this mysterious character called the Batwoman, who is not related to the Batwoman that we would eventually, that's Bruce Wayne's cousin, who we would eventually see later on. This is completely different. And it turns out this Batwoman is several different females trying to get revenge for something, and Batman ends up having to interfere alongside Robin and so forth. And for the first film to be based on the anime series since Batman Beyond came out, it's kind of good to see Batman and Robin back and the sort of animated series style return. And it's good. I don't really sure if I feel it's really needed, because it was okay for what it was. But I think out of the 3 animated series films, this one's definitely the weakest one in my honest opinion. Because the first one was obviously very epic, the second one was very tragic, and this one is very okay, I guess. So yeah, so I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. So in the sort of 90s, I know that film was released in the early 90s, but anyway, so in the 90s, there were people that were attempting to sort of do audio dramas that were basically following the events of different comic book stories, and one of those was and one of the more official ones made by DC was Nightfall. Nightfall is the comic book series in which Bane famously breaks the Batman's back, and in this sort of 2.5 hour audio drama, it's definitely a good retelling of the story. I think a lot of the characters do kind of act very dramatic, and so are not very serious and brutal. It kind of feels very dramatic, and probably a bit overly dramatic based on how the people talking in the series go. But I thought it was good, and it definitely helped me imagine what went down. So yeah, so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. And next is the Batman. But before I talk about Batman, I need to have another drink.
Eventually.
So, the Batman. So I've only seen a handful of episodes, and this is basically Batman the Animated Series, but focused on a younger Batman, and obviously set in its own universe because it has its own Justice League and everything. All the characters have very interesting and unique designs, especially Joker, who has longer hair this time. Penguin also looks different this time as well, and I think the animation style is good. Kind of gives it a more slightly Ben 10 anime kind of style, which I do kind of like in a way. Obviously, this came out long before Ben 10 was ever a thing, but it's obviously the Ben 10 style, or kind of leads into the Ben 10 style. And from the few episodes I've seen, including one that is a retelling of Dick Grayson's origins, I do kind of like it. So I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. And it too had its own feature film, Batman vs. Dracula, which is basically as you'd expect it to be. A Dracula character arrives in Gotham, turns some of the villains and other characters into vampires, and it's up to Batman to basically stop him and use all the usual shenanigans that can usually kill Dracula to do just that. Although obviously try not to kill, because obviously Batman doesn't kill. So yeah. So it's a good film, and I'll give it an 8 out of 10, because I do actually remember having fun with it very well. But one film I definitely did not have fun with is this next one, which is quite simply called Catwoman. So since Michelle Pfeiffer played Catwoman, there was like lots of attempts to create a film based around the character, and ultimately they ended up making this film with Halle Berry in it, who quite happily went to the Razzie Awards to pick up her awards, because she was quite happy just to be in a bad film to balance out her career, and good for her really, because yeah, this film's really bad. It's definitely a much different telling of Catwoman's origin stories compared to other times that has been explained and everything. So yeah, and honestly, I think it's okay, but honestly, I think like the whole idea and scenario of it is, I don't know, it's just weird. It's very cheap looking, and it doesn't feel like the Catwoman that all of us have come to know and love. And I don't even like the outfit as well. It just looks very skimpy and so forth. And yeah, it's a really bad film, and I don't really want to talk about it anymore. So I'm just going to give it a 2 out of 10, because out of everything that's to do with Batman, this is probably the worst thing I've seen, and it's not even laughably bad. It's just bad. So yeah. And then came Christopher Nolan, who came to save the day with Batman by bringing us his own version of Batman, starting with Batman Begins. So Batman Begins is pretty much as you expect it to be, another retelling of Batman's origin story, and it kind of sort of does a sort of very quick glossing over of his relationship with James Gordon. And it's also a film that has Ra's al Ghul, who in this film is played by Liam Neeson. It has the Scarecrow, played by, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Cillian Murphy. And they basically joined forces to try and bring fear to Gotham, while at the same time allow the League of Assassins to take over. And this is probably the first time where I've seen Batman portrayed more accurately, because Christian Bale, who plays Batman in these films, he's very dark, very brutal. He doesn't technically kill, well, to begin with anyway, and yeah, I think Batman Begins is a very good film, and it's definitely a good start to what would end up being one of the most critically acclaimed superhero trilogies of all time. And Christopher Nolan really understands the character well, and good on him for doing 3 films, although he could have just stuck with the 1 film, but he went on and did 3. So yeah, so I'm going to give Batman Begins a 9 out of 10, because it is good, but I think the second one is even better, but we'll get to that later. First up, we have Batman Gotham Knight. So it's very much up to debate as to whether you kind of treat this as part of the Dark Knight universe or its own separate thing, but it's basically an anthology film collecting a series of short stories created by Japanese studios together. Kevin Conroy is back to voice Batman, and it's kind of like a good collection of stories. So there's one where these children are kind of telling their version of events that happened with Batman. You got another one where Batman is fighting Deadshot, another where he's fighting Scarecrow again. You got one where he's trying to figure out how he managed to sort of deal with pain, and lots of others as well. And I do like the sort of animation styles that they go with. It's all very much as anime as you can get, but they're all very different, very unique, and I like how for the first Batman film to be part of the sort of DC Universe animated original movies line, this was like the one that they went with first, and I do kind of like the style that each of the studios went with for these different short films. They could have put it better separately, but together they're still very good, and they don't kind of intertwine with one another. They just are told from beginning to end, then move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So I'm gonna give Batman Gotham Knight as an overall feature a 9 out of 10. And now we come to the second Christopher Nolan film, which is of course The Dark Knight. And I'm gonna have some water first before I move on. So in this film, Batman is pretty much still fighting crime again, and he and James Gordon come across this calling card, which is very obviously hinting that the Joker, played by the very late Heath Ledger, has made his debut and is very much there to sort of commit crime in Gotham and to kind of put Gotham at odds with each other and so forth. And he's basically one of those, and in this version he's a villain that basically wants to take over Gotham and does everything he can to do that, but not through traditional Joker methods. He does it his own way, which I do kind of like and appreciate. Why So Serious, or the rest of it. You got Harvey Dent in this film. I forget the actor's name, but he's in a lot. Has been in a lot of things. Who becomes Two-Face eventually. And this is like, and spoiler alert, this is kind of like the first time where Batman does kill, although he only does it because there was no other way. Because usually with superheroes, most superheroes would try not to kill anyway, but with Batman it's very particular with Batman because he does actually make it well known that he has a no-kill rule, but there has been times where he will do it when there's no other choice, and on this occasion there was no other choice, so I do kind of understand it there. But yeah, The Dark Knight is a very good film. It's got definitely a very good starter, and it's definitely definitely one of the best Batman films I've ever seen. Yeah, it's as good as you're gonna get. Do I have problems with it? I do. I mean, it's not like traditional Batman stuff, but I do kind of like the direction it was going, and I thought it was a very good film, and definitely one of the good sequels to films out there. But I don't think it's a perfect film, especially because the first time I see it was actually the first time I saw one of the Christopher Nolan films, so I did just kind of watch it out of order to begin with. So I'm going to give, on that basis, I'm going to give The Dark Knight a 9 out of 10. I'm going to have another drink. Ugh. So next up is Batman the Brave and the Bold, which is, of course, an animated series, and in this one it kind of tries to sort of retell the sort of classic comics where all the characters teamed up, but it's all fine and in everything, and it's kind of got a similar sort of Adam West kind of style to it, but it does try its best to be its own thing as well. And you know, despite the campness and silliness of this show, it does have one serious episode which I do kind of like. So in this particular episode, which I actually forget the name of, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are back. This time voicing the Stranger and the Spectre, respectively, and they're kind of like the good and bad conscience of Batman, because obviously some animated characters have those good conscience and a bad conscience, one being the devil, the other being the angel. Although in this occasion they don't kind of make it too obvious as to who's who. But it's basically on this occasion Batman realizing that he has an opportunity to finally get revenge on the person that killed his parents, which is obviously Joe Chill, because Joe Chill has re-emerged and he has that opportunity to finally get revenge on him. But because he is Batman, he kind of gets conflicted as to whether he wants to kill Joe Chill, not knowing full well that it would go against the one law of no killing Batman. And it's a very standout episode because it's a celebration of Batman in a way, especially with the return of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, and I think Anna West was in this as well. So yeah, it was a big, massive celebration of all things to do with Batman, and one of those few stories that you really have to watch, because it's not often that Batman gets the opportunity to finally get revenge on the man that killed his parents, because usually most versions would have the police take care of him and he'll come up with everything, but no, on this occasion he has an opportunity to finally kill Joe Chill if he really wants to. But yeah, I'm rambling on, but apart from that one standout episode, the rest of the series is basically as you'd expect it to be. Batman going on various adventures, and it's very sort of camp, corny, fun and so forth. It's very more family friendly compared to most Batman cartoons that I've seen, or animated stuff that I've seen in general. So I'm going to give it, just from that standout episode alone, an 8 out of 10. And yeah, it's good if you like that sort of thing. So then came the time when the superhero genre really needed a revamp for video games. So Idios, I think is the name of them, decided they wanted a superhero game, and decided to acquire the Batman license from Warner Brothers to create a Batman game. And they decided to contract Rocksteady, who were at the time very unknown, which is a British video game developer, for those of you that didn't know. And they were contracted to create this Batman game, which was known as Arkham Asylum. So this game is mostly based on the comic book known as Arkham Asylum: Serious House on the Serious Earth, and it sees Batman entering Arkham Asylum to take on the Joker and other villains who for the first time ever have the edge over Batman, because Arkham Asylum is their home. It's a place that they know very well, and Batman does know it as well, but is obviously not really a patient there, so he actually doesn't know how to deal with it and so forth. So yeah, if you've seen my earlier sort of playthrough videos, I have played Batman all the Batman Arkham games so far, apart from maybe one or two that I've not done videos of yet. But yeah, it's basically Batman going into Arkham Asylum to fight the Joker and anyone that's associated with him in his plans, including the likes of Victor Zask, obviously Harley Quinn, Bane. I know Clayface makes an appearance at one point, and I know the Riddler, despite not physically appearing, he leaves his trophies around for you to collect and everything. And it's a very fun Batman experience if you're okay playing as a Batman in a very confined space. So yeah. So Arkham Asylum, very good video game, and obviously you got Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and Arlen Sorkin back, voicing their characters, doing what they do best. So it's kind of like the sort of definitive Batman experience if you want a Batman experience in a confined space. And it's definitely helped revamp the superhero genre for video games as well. So I'm going to give Arkham Asylum a 9 out of 10. It's because it's a very good Batman game, don't get me wrong, but the confined space isn't to everybody's cup of tea, so yeah. And then keeping with the fun sort of video games, next up is Lego Batman the video game. So this was made by TT Games, and this was during the period of time where they weren't really doing voice acting for their characters, they were just doing sort of miming and comedic timing and everything. And this was actually the first of their games where they didn't actually base anything on specific films or TV shows. No, this time they actually did their own story. So you got 3 different scenarios. One featured where the Joker's hatching plans with his pals, another where the Penguin's hatching plans with his pals, and yet another where the Riddler's hatching plans with his pals. And it's basically like focused on one particular group of villains. So there's 3 groups of villains, and you get to play both and play all 3 scenarios on Batman and Robin's side and also on the villain's side. And it has Batman as you can get different suits you get to play as, you get to fight all the different enemies, and it's basically one enemy to defeat per level. And it's got all the usual stuff you'd expect in a TT games kind of thing. So yeah, it's very good fun. So I'm going to give Lego Batman the video game a 9 out of 10, only because despite it being fun, it is quite an old game, and doesn't all going to work on some kind of hardware these days unless you find a way to make it work, in which case do let me know, because I've only done like one video, but it was only because I couldn't get it to work on co-op for whatever reason. So yeah. Anyway, so next up we have another animated film, Batman Under the Red Hood, and this film is a retelling of the story in which Jason Todd is killed by the Joker. Quite a famous comic book story, because it's one where readers could phone DC Comics and let them know how they feel the story should end, because there was a choice to vote between 2 different ones: either the Joker kills Jason Todd or Jason Todd lives, and everyone voted for Jason Todd to die because he was one of the Robins that people liked the least. Although he did come back eventually, as seen in this film, in which he portrays Red Hood. And it's definitely one of those interesting Batman stories in which you don't know what Batman's going to do. He's basically made up his mind that he doesn't want to kill the Joker, despite what the Joker's done, and he will do whatever he can to do what he does. So yeah, it's definitely a good story, and it's definitely one that does sort of make you question everything about why should Batman keep Joker alive despite everything he's done and everything. And I like the design of the Red Hood. It doesn't really explain what happened to the Red Hood after this film, because it's implied that he dies at the end of the film, and I think it was the same in the comics as well. But then they bring him back for some reason, and he ends up just being part of the Bat family from that point on. I don't know. It's just the way things are, I guess. So yeah, so I'm going to give Batman Under the Red Hood another 9 out of 10. And I'm going to have another drink. Yeah, I'm getting through this, so do bear with me, guys. So next is Batman Year One. So this is obviously based on the comic book of the same name, and as you'd expect, it's basically talks about Batman during the time when he's Batman for like the very first year he's Batman. In this film, you got Batman and Jim Gordon sort of sharing their thoughts and so forth, and fighting crime and so forth, and they do kind of cross paths at times, but yeah, it's basically just focused on Batman's first year of crime fighting. And this film, I know, is part of a small sort of shared universe in which it shares it with at least one short film and a 2-part film, which I'll talk about a little later on. But yeah, it's basically what you expect it to be, focused on Batman's first year of crime fighting, where he fights a corrupt police force, fights mafia bosses and the rest of it. So yeah, I don't really remember it that well, but I remember it being pretty good, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 as well. Bringing us on to the next Arkham game, Arkham City. So Arkham City is a bit more free in the sense that you're not in a confined space this time, and you can actually sort of explore a very small part of Gotham, which is sort of kind of walled off because Mayor Quimby, Mayor Sharp, I think his name is, yeah, Mayor Quimby's obviously from The Simpsons. He sets about sort of making sure that all the inmates from both Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Prison are sent to Arkham City, because no one really wants them around, and no one can be asked to sort of hand them over after what happened in Arkham Asylum, so they just give them their own walled-off territory. Batman enters the scene, and things transpire and happen. So this time round, so in the game, it's implied that by the time Batman arrives, it's implied that there's already established gangs in Arkham City. So there's one led by Two-Face, one led by Penguin, and one led by a slowly dying Joker. And it's up to Batman to basically bring an end to the gang war, while at the same time finding out the truth behind Arkham City, why it's there, why it exists, and so forth. And it pretty much features a lot more Batman villains, including, as mentioned, Two-Face and a Penguin that's voiced by Nolan North, doing a very poor Cockney accent. It's kind of sort of very close to being how Dick Van Dyke did a Cockney accent in Mary Poppins. But yeah, it's an improvement over Arkham Asylum for sure, and it definitely has a lot more gadgets to play with. You can glide a bit more, you can do all sorts in the game. It's definitely not a confined space as the previous game was, although you will still have to go into some spaces that are very confined. So yeah, so I'm going to give Arkham City a 9 out of 10. And around the same time that Arkham City came out, there was Gotham City Imposters, which was this online multiplayer game where you basically get to play as different Batman villains, I guess, or sort of your own villains fighting each other. And I'll be honest, I only got as far as the training mode, and then I didn't really bother playing the game after that because it just took ages to find a game on the server. And I don't even know if it's still running today, but I'll be interested to know if it is running, and then, you know, maybe I'll play it with friends and so forth. So yeah. Hold on, just looking at something here. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna give Gotham City Imposters a 5 out of 10, only because I didn't get very far in it, and I don't want to give it a very harsh rating because it's not exactly fair if I've not got very far in it. So yeah. And now we come to the final of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight films, and this one's known as The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. With respect, I think he could have come up with a much creative name instead of just having The Dark Knight again in the title, but you know, Dark Knight Rises is still good. So in this one, people are still suffering with the aftermath of what the Joker and Two-Face did, and Bane enters the scene. And this time, Bane is not a zombie like in Batman and Robin. No, this time Bane is basically, as one of my friends puts it, his own boss. He basically comes in with a very commanding presence and basically takes over Gotham, putting the police force in underground, and takes over Gotham and gets rid of Batman, and he basically quickly takes over. And in this film, Catwoman, played by Anne Hathaway, is in this as well. And Catwoman this time is treated as basically a cat burglar, or like the typical Catwoman who tries to help Batman any way she can. And this one kind of follows the sort of Nightfall storyline, because this one Bane breaks Batman's back. Ra's al Ghul also appears through visions as well, and it's it's a film where Gotham is at its most vulnerable, and where it looks like people are going to lose, but then Batman arrives to give them hope and sort of tries to, and ultimately makes the ultimate sacrifice. You all know the story. And it's also the first time I've seen Joseph Gordon-Levitt in a very serious, mature film, because previously he was obviously in that American sitcom that I the name of. So it was good to see him in a very dramatic and serious role, and I know he was basically someone that a lot of females and men into men would like to work, because he has that sort of cute face of his. But yeah, Dark Knight Rises. I don't think it's the best of the Dark Knight films, but it's certainly not the worst one in my opinion. I don't think any of them are that bad, not really. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it's not the traditional Bane, but I do kind of like the way Tom Hardy does Bane, and yeah, it's still pretty good. So yeah. So because the next Arkham game by Rocksteady was taking ages to make, Warner Brothers decided to recruit their Montreal team to create a game to sort of tide people over until the next Arkham game arrived, which is Arkham Origins. As you might expect, this is basically another origin story, although this time it's implied that it's set during year 2 of Batman's time being Batman, and it features a largely new cast, although some cast members do return. There are the most notable cast changes this time being that Roger Craig Smith voices Batman. Roger Craig Smith, for those who don't know, is also the current voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, and since this game has voiced Batman and other things. And Troy Baker is playing Joker this time, and again Troy Baker has also has portrayed the Joker and other things as well, and also Batman himself too. So yeah, so in this game, a bounty is placed on Batman's head, and Batman has to stop all the different bad guys that are trying to capture him for bounty, which leads him into fighting some of the most iconic DC villains out there, including some in his own hometown. So you got Deadshot, you've got Deathstroke, you've got Copperhead, you've got Bane, you've got Killer Croc. You've got one of the members of the League of Assassins after him as well, and all sorts of other things going on. And also there's a corrupt police force as well. And Jim Gordon's trying to understand Batman, and ultimately does sort of understand his ways and so forth. Although it's kind of, and the same with Alfred, although it's kind of hesitant and so forth. So yeah. So Arkham Origins, I mean, if you just want a much more expanded version of Arkham City, it's basically that. Yeah, and it's with its own story and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10 because although it's not a bad Arkham game, it's definitely a game that feels like it's a rinse and repeat of one of the previous games, because it doesn't really add much new to the formula. Maybe some gameplay stuff that's a little different and new enemy types, but that's as far as it goes. And then it came with a sort of sequel game called Arkham Origins Blackgate, which is more of a side-scrolling kind of game, in which Blackgate Prison is taken over by different enemies, and it's up to Batman to stop said enemies. And ultimately, it kind of establishes Batman and Jim Gordon's relationship in this one. And I don't remember playing much of it, but I thought it was okay. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, slightly lower because I don't remember it that well, and I need another drink. Okay, thank you for sticking with me so far, guys. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of these videos. They're usually not as long as this, but because there's so much to talk about with Batman, that I feel it has to be like this. So yeah. Anyway, so next we come to the next Lego game, which is Lego Batman 2 DC Superheroes. This also had a film adaptation as well called Lego Batman the Movie DC Superheroes Unite, but it's basically tells the exact same story with almost the exact same cutscenes and everything. And it's the very first TT game of their Lego games to be open world sandbox and also feature voice acting. And in this game, as I said, Troy Baker plays Batman in these games. And in this game, Joker and Lex Luthor team up to basically try and get revenge on Bruce Wayne for winning Man of the Year, and also try and take down Superman as well. And Superman teams up with Batman and Robin to try and stop them, and eventually the Justice League arrive. And yeah, it's one of those films where villains try and do villainous things, and the sort of original trinity of heroes have to fight them. So yeah, it's a fun game. Don't get me wrong, I think all the Lego games are fun for sure, but this one in particular I thought was okay for the fun side. Definitely, I think the best of the 3 Lego Batman games. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. The one I don't think was as good as the previous one was the third game, Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. And the reason I say this is because this one is obviously set in space, so you get access to Watchtower, all the different Lantern planets and other places too, hence the name Beyond Gotham. So it does kind of sort of try and work with various others of DC superheroes, but it has a particular focus on Brainiac, which is obviously a Superman villain, and the Lantern planets, which is obviously to do with Green Lantern and so forth. So it does try to be less Batman but more about those, but it does still feature like Joker, Solomon Grundy, Lex Luthor, Killer Croc, and other villains that end up working with Batman and co to stop Brainiac with his plans. And it's a fun Lego game as well, but it's definitely a lot shorter, and it does go by very quickly. But they do make up for that with all the different DLC levels that are based on different various DC properties, including the Adam West Batman, the Man of Steel, Arrow, Suicide Squad, and others as well. So yeah, and it does feature a few celebrity cameos as well, including Kevin Smith, Conan O'Brien, Daffy Duck appears at one point, Mr. Marcy pick as well, and obviously Adam West and Burt Ward as well. So yeah, and even Adam West himself is like the Stan Lee of this game, because you have to try and rescue him and he makes cameos. So yeah, so I'm gonna give Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham a slightly lower 8 out of 10, because it is still fun still, but if you want to have like the best fun ever, you're better off with the previous Lego game. So yeah. So in addition to the 2 Arkham Origins games, another thing that came out during the time between Arkham City and Arkham Knight, which I'll talk about later, is the film Assault on Arkham, which, although it is called Batman Assault on Arkham, it feels more like a Suicide Squad film that happens to feature Batman in there as well, who is voiced by Kevin Conroy once again. So in this film, Amanda Waller recruits the Suicide Squad, which in this lineup includes Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Killer Frost, and a few other characters that I forget the names of. And they kind of come together to infiltrate Arkham to find something to do with the Riddler. And yeah, as usual, the Suicide Squad betray Amanda Waller, and Batman interferes at one point as well. And it's basically a sort of film version of the first game, but obviously not actually based on the story of the first game. It's, yeah, as you expect it to be. So I'm gonna give, and I think the Assault on Arkham is good fun, and also if you like the looks of Killer Frost and Harley Quinn in this film, then you might be pleased to know that they do sort of barrel at one point in the film as well, or a couple of points. So obviously you don't need DeviantArt or Wolf 34 to look at that. But yeah, Assault on Arkham 9 out of 10, because I did quite enjoy it. And then going back to where Year 1 came in, we now come to the 2-part film that is part of that universe, called The Dark Knight Returns. So this was originally split into 2 parts, but then eventually ended up being released into 1 part, which doesn't really do much other than change the sort of ending of part 1 and so forth. I'm just gonna have another drink quickly. And in this film, it's set many years later, and it's based on a Frank Miller story. It's set many years later, in which Batman has long since retired, and Bruce Wayne is just enjoying life being Bruce Wayne. But then the crime sort of rises in Gotham as a result of this new gang called the Mutants arriving to try and take over. So Batman decides it's time to be Batman. So Bruce Wayne decides it's time to be Batman again, and sets out to stop the mutants, and also work with Jim Gordon, who himself is also retiring. Who himself is also retiring, and they both work together to try and stop the mutants, and eventually gets to a point where a new commissioner comes in, and this commissioner is hell-bent on trying to stop Batman, and eventually the Joker reemerges as well, and they have a very brutal fight, and Superman, who now works for the government, also comes to Gotham in an attempt to stop Batman, and it eventually becomes clear that Gotham has become a crime-free city as a result of Batman's work, and it kind of makes the president very embarrassed, so he sends Superman to deal with Batman. And it's basically the sort of story, it's basically one of those stories in which it's kind of sort of imagining how Batman's final battles with Joker and Superman would play out, and it's very much as epic, as heart-pounding, and sort of sad as you can get. So yeah, and both fights kind of end with neither side kind of winning, although with the Joker's one it's kind of with neither side winning, because one of them just lets the other win by default. So yeah, so I'm gonna give The Dark Knight Returns a 9 out of 10, because I really did enjoy it, but I think this sort of, they tried to mimic the style from the comics as best they could, but it still doesn't look quite right. And the style of the comics is very sort of, well, if you've read the comics, you'll know what I'm on about, but it does kind of look weird, so yeah. Excuse me while I have another drink. Okay, so so next we have The Killing Joke. So Killing Joke, as you'd expect it to be, is based on one of the shortest Batman stories ever, so it would kind of work better as a short story or part of the DC Showcase line, but Bruce, Tim and co decided they wanted to make it into a feature-length film, and the thing that they did was a thing that most of us kind of don't really expected it to start out, and they do kind of make that very clear from the beginning that it's not the way we would have started out. So the first 20 to 40 minutes is basically establishing Batgirl as a character and what happened to her, and basically finding criminals and so forth. And then eventually there's that controversial scene in which she has sex with Batman, or it's implied that they have sex, and it doesn't feel right because Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne, it kind of feels like a father and daughter relationship, or a mentor and student relationship, never an actual proper relationship. And then they finish that story, and then completely out of nowhere they start the Killing Joke storyline and completely disregard and ignore everything that came before that. And you got Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy back voicing their respective characters, and what I think is the best part about this film, that's actually also its most redeemable quality, is the whole actual scene where Batman and Joker actually talk to each other like humans for the very first time. It's a sight that's not often seen, especially because of how Batman and the Joker are to one another. But when they're actually very human, it's actually quite an emotional scene, because Batman is just trying to help the Joker, realizing that all that Joker wanted is help with his condition, but the Joker refuses it outright because he feels it's just too late. And then what's really like the most heartwarming thing is that the Joker delivers the titular Killing Joke, in which he says a joke and then he and Batman laugh, and it's like the first time that both of them have actually laughed together, and it's not just Joker, it's actually Batman. And then, just like with the comic, it ends without really sort of explaining what happened after the joke was delivered. So it's left to the people as to how it plays out. But most people would probably think that the Joker would just be sent back to Arkham, Batman would continue fighting crime, and they don't talk about this situation ever again. So yeah, it's definitely a very intense comic, because it makes Barbara Gordon vulnerable, because it's implied that the Joker raped her and did photos of her naked, and they also strip down Jim Gordon as well, who is basically trying to save Barbara Gordon, but Joker's intent is very much wanted to turn him into a circus freak and so forth. So yeah, a lot's happening, and the first 40 minutes could have just been cut out completely, and as I said, it could have just been a DC Showcase short, but it ended up just being what it was. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 only because of the first 40 minutes. If they didn't have the first 40 or so minutes, then it would have been a much better film, but it is what it is. So yeah. So next we come to the last of Rocksteady's Arkham games, and when I say the last, I do mean last, because the spin-off game Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is, to be honest, it's, even though I know it's set in the Arkhamverse, it could have been its own thing, it could have been its own DC Elseworld kind of story, but no, it's just not. But anyway, so Arkham Knight, set not long after Arkham City, in which Scarecrow has returned and is basically bent on trying to take over Gotham and turn it into a city of fear. And Batman has to deal with that, as well as this titular character who calls himself the Arkham Knight. And if you're very familiar with the Red Hood story, you'll know exactly who the Arkham Knight is, even before House, because he just says so many things that you do often think that yes, he's basically just Jason Todd, and turns out he is Jason Todd. They could have come with their own original idea, original character and everything, but no, it's just Jason Todd. And then Batman has to fight his inner demons because Joker is trying to take over his body from the dead. And then while that's all happening, he also has to deal with these other villains that are doing their own thing, like Two-Face is doing bank robberies, Penguin is trying to do arms deals, he's also having to deal with deal with the guard, Killer Croc and the guard, Mr. Freeze's problem, Poison Ivy's doing stuff as well, and all sorts. Yeah, just basically lots of different villains and characters doing different things, and and while this does feel like a good finale to the Arkham series, and definitely a very intense and edge of your seat kind of finale, it also kind of feels like it's not the finale we want that to be deserved, because there's a lot of stuff that was cut from this game, including a part where for the first time ever we would actually play the enemy that Batman would be trying to defeat in Predator mode, which was cut out completely for whatever reason, and all this other stuff that sounded cool. That sounded very cool to do, but ultimately it just wasn't meant to be. So yeah, so overall I'm going to give Arkham Knight, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because I do think it's it's still a good game. It's just not the Arkham game that many people would have wanted to, end it all, because of the repetitive gameplay, the sort of questionable choices with characters and stories and everything. And it's also interesting that for the age rating here, it's actually rated higher than the other games because of reasons. And I think the reason behind that is because of the Professor Pig storyline. Because in the Professor Pig storyline, you're having to find these mysterious figures that have been left for dead, and they basically have their faces removed and all sorts of other things moving. You have to do x-rays and so forth, and it's kind of quite gruesome. So I think that's the reason why it has an 18 rating this time compared to the 16 rating that the game had previously. So after Arkham Knight came Arkham VR, which is, as you'd expect it to be, it's a VR experience. It's basically a sort of basic VR experience with Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy voicing their characters. And I'm not sure where it's set in the Arkhamverse, but it's kind of implied that it's all a dream that Bruce Wayne has at one point, and yeah, it's what it is. It's a VR experience set in the Arkhamverse with not really much else to it. And there is another VR game later down the line that I think is a much better VR Batman game, but this is just as basic as you're gonna get. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Bringing us on to the Gotham TV series, I'm just going to have another drink before time. The Gotham TV series, I'm not going to go through each season because there's still a lot to get through, so I don't really have time to do it. But yeah, Gotham is basically a TV series that tries to establish the origins of different Batman characters, specifically the villains, and it does do it pretty well. Obviously, the main villain that they focus on is Penguin, who spends much of the series sort of working his way up to becoming a powerful crime mafia boss. And then you got all these other characters. You got these two twins played by Cameron Monaghan that end up becoming the Joker. You got a young Selena Kyle being Catwoman, of course. Bruce Wayne's in it as well. Sean Pertwee plays Alfred Pennyworth this time. And it's basically the Batman version of Smallville. Smallville is basically meant to talk about Superman becoming Superman, and basically focus on the time that it's not really talked about much in any form of Superman. And then in this one, it's basically the same thing, but focused on Batman and all the villains that he ends up fighting. With the final scene being set in the sort of distant future where we see Batman being Batman. So yeah, it only ran for 5 seasons compared to the 10 seasons that Smallville had, and probably just as well because there's only so much you can do with these different characters. And I know 2 of the actors in this series that portrayed Jim Gordon and one of his partners ended up getting married, so good on them. So Gotham, I think, is a very good TV series. It's, as you'd expect it to be, an origin story for all the villains and Batman himself, and all of his allies that he's had over the years. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for the show overall. And if I ever do decide to return to do a sort of in-depth review of it, I will of course talk about each of the seasons and break them individually. yeah. So next is Lego Batman Family Matters, which is basically a direct-to-home media Lego Batman film, and yeah, it's basically what you think it is, a Lego story featuring Batman characters with not too cheap animation, but animation that is very as direct-to-home media as you can get. Troy Baker's voicing Batman, and I guess if you want to put something on for the children to watch, if they're into Batman, then this is good. But otherwise, you can just leave it and move on to something else. I thought it was okay, not really my cup of tea, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And then around the time that the 75th anniversary arrived, we got 2 anniversary shorts, one by Bruce Timm and one by Darwin Cook. And also a Lego one as well. So the Bruce Timm one is Batman fighting Hugo Strange once again, not Doctor Strange because that's obviously Marvel, who's made this Frankenstein character do stuff. Darwin Cook's one is a Batman Beyond short in which Terry McGinnis and Bruce Wayne fight a robot version of the animated series Batman, and then end up fighting other robot versions of Batman from across all forms media. And then the Lego one is basically all these Batmen coming together to go to this party and doing all the different ways that they can do that. So yeah, they're short, they're fun, they have their own unique styles and everything, and I think each of them are pretty good on their own, and I don't have anything negative to say about them other than that they kind of, I don't know, the Batman Beyond one does end on an unresolved cliffhanger. The Lego one is just Lego as you can get, and the Bruce Timm one is as Bruce Timm as you can get. So yeah, I'm gonna give them all a 9 out of 10 because they are pretty good, really. So yeah. So in a cinematic universe called the DC Animated Movie Universe, which is basically DC if it was in an anime form and focused on New 52, the New 52 forms of different characters. The first of these for Batman was Son of Batman. So in Son of Batman, Batman finds out that he has a son called Damian Wayne, who's basically the fourth Robin, if you're following like the comics, who's very much into being like part of the League of Assassins, and he and Batman are at odds with one another, but they end up working together eventually and so forth. I actually don't remember this animated film all that well, so I'm not going to waste any more time on it, but I do like the style and everything of it, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. This was then followed by Batman vs. Robin, which is basically what you expect it to be, a film where Batman fights against Robin, and I think and if I remember, it's something about them being at odds with one another. Drink. Yeah, being at odds with one another over something, and yeah, but it just follows the same basic formula, design and everything, but good fun again. So I'm gonna give it a slightly higher 8 out of 10. And then finally the third one, and then there's another one that I'll talk about a little later on if I've put it in the list here, which hopefully I've done, but if not, then well, oh well. The third one is about Bad Blood, in which Batman basically goes against his allies, and his allies have to work together to try and get him out of the situation. And it's basically like a big come together kind of film. But I don't really remember it all that well either, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 as well. Next is the Lego Batman movie, not to be confused with the Batman movies, the Lego Batman movies I've talked about previously. This is set in the Lego movie universe, with Will Arnett reprising his role, and it's basically a big sloppy love letter and celebration of all things Batman, because in this film it's implied that the events of the previous Batman films have already happened, and Batman is just being Batman, and he just wants to go about life being the playboy philanthropist that he is, but eventually he has to come to terms with the fact that he accidentally adopted a son, and he basically works with him to basically become the new Robin. And eventually Batman kind of learns the whole idea of sort of working together with family and so forth. And I kind of like that in this film it's not just focused on strictly Batman villains, and because the Batman villains have screwed over Joker, he decides that he's had enough of them and recruits villains from other franchises, and he goes into the Phantom Zone. I don't know how all these different other villains, such as the Daleks, Sauron, Voldemort, King Kong, and the rest, I don't know how they ended up there of all things, but yeah, it is what it is. So Lego Batman movie, but it is really fun though. So Lego Batman movie, 9 out of 10. And just gonna check stuff.
Eventually.
Yeah, after Batman Bad Blood came Hush, which is basically as you'd expect it to be, based on the comic book story known as Hush, in which Hush is this character that arrives in Gotham, and he's basically a character that's trying to sort of impersonate Bruce Wayne and so forth, and Batman's trying to figure out who it is and fights all the different villains he's had, and then it's eventually revealed that this guy is the Riddler, although in the comic book version it's different, but in the film it's the Riddler. And even though it's set in the same universe as the 3 other Batman films I've talked about, it's not that good, but still okay in places. So I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. So then Mattel decided to create a series of Batman toys, and to advertise it and promote it, they worked with DC Animation to create a trilogy of films and also a series online, which I'm going to talk about right now. So first off, the series online, which doesn't really have much dialogue as far as I know, but it's basically a collection of short films featuring all these characters fighting crime and so forth, just to advertise the toys. Is as you'd expect it to be. But some fun, some not so fun, and some okay and everything. So I'm gonna give them all a 6 out of 10. Then we have Animal Instinct, which is the first of the films, and in this one, Penguin decides to create these robotic creatures that are basically set about trying to protect Penguin and so forth, and eventually they get haywire and so forth, and also Batman and Co have to deal with various animal villains, so they end up fighting them, and it's basically as you'd expect it to be, a film advertising toys but trying to be as fun as you can get. But it just feels like the most generic thing I've seen ever, but it is what it is, so I'll give it a 6 out of 10. And then came Monster Mayhem, in which is a much more entertaining film out of the 3 films because the Joker's in it a lot, and he's voiced by Troy Baker again. And Batman enters virtual reality. He and his allies have to fight enemies and so forth. It is once again trying to advertise toys, but at least it's a much more entertaining film compared to previous films. So I'm going to give it a slightly higher 8 out of 10. And then finally, last one, Max vs. Mutants, is one in which Batman makes this giant robot to fight this creature, and then it's revealed in the past that Penguin recruits Mr. Freeze and a bunch of other monstrous characters to try and take over Gotham again, and they fight and so forth. Yeah, you can tell that I'm not really that keen on Batman Unlimited overalls, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. That one. So after the Green Lantern anime series came and went, DC and Warner Bros. Decided to create a very similarly made show called Beware the Batman, and it's basically what you expect it to be, a CGI version of a CGI Batman with an Alfred Pennyworth that is not really like a typical British posh butler who used to be a spy. No, it's different with a much more brutal one. It kind of feels like whatever his name is, the guy that played Gollum, Andy Serkis. There we go. So yeah, but I only remember seeing like 1 or 2 episodes, and from the first couple of episodes, I just couldn't get into it, and I just didn't understand or get it. So yeah, but I'll be fair to it because it did look like a sort of traditional CGI kind of story, but at least the looks of the characters still look like the characters are not too ugly looking. So I'm gonna give it a yeah, 6 out of 10. And I promised I'd talk about the other Birds of Prey, and now I'm going to talk about the other Birds of Prey thing, which is of course Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Incantation of One Harley Quinn. So this is the second film to feature in the DC Extended Universe to feature Harley Quinn, and it's more kind of personal because this time it's actually focused. It's a Birds of Prey film, but kind of focused on Harley Quinn, who's doing what she can to basically live a good life, and then she comes across this girl that she has to protect from Roman Sinonis, who is played by Ewan McGregor, who is the Black Mask in this universe. And even though I know it didn't do too well because for reasons including the fact that I was released just before COVID happened, it's okay. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's definitely a much better Harley Quinn film than Suicide Squad, which came before it. So I did kind of find some enjoyment in it as I just looked at it, just make sure I'm not missed anything. Yep. So I'm gonna give this film a 9 out of 10 because it is actually good fun, to be fair. And just when you thought there was no more Anna West stuff, Anna West and gang return for a couple of animated films, which the first of which I'll talk about now, which is Return of the Caped Crusaders. So this one is an animated version of the 66 series with all the cast, with the cast that's still alive returning, with some new cast members, and for some reason I did watch it, and I think I did get into it quite quickly, but the problem is these actors sound much older than the characters that they're playing as, so it's kind of a little distracting on that front, but it's what you'd expect it to be. It's an animated version of the series, and it's done reasonably well with all the usual shenanigans and everything. So I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10, and it would have been higher had the cast members don't sound older than the actual characters that they're playing as, because that's a little bit distracting. Next up, and I'm just gonna have a drink before I carry on. So next up is Batman and Harley Quinn. So some people might think that this is part of the animated series universe, whatever, but it's basically meant to mimic the style of that universe, and it's very much its own thing, trying to be a fun little story with Kevin Conroy back as Batman, and Harley Quinn this time voiced by Bernadette from The Big Bang Theory, and I think she actually fits the role quite well. And the story behind it is that Batman has to work with Harley Quinn, who has long since given up her time being the Joker's pet person, whatever, and works with Batman to try and stop Poison Ivy with this plan she has with this thing that's meant to resemble Swamp Thing, and they work together alongside Nightwing, who I guess you could say was very nearly seduced by Harley Quinn, and does kind of look like a DeviantArt thing I saw where Nightwing was pretty much naked but still maintaining his mask. But anyway, so Batman Harley Quinn's a fun film. Doesn't take itself too seriously, but it is good fun. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. And then comes the second and final film of the Anna West saga of things, which is Batman vs Two-Face. Now, the reason I say this was the last thing is because this came out not long after Adam West passed away, and so by the time this one came out, it was pretty much to imply that this was going to be the very last thing we'd ever see of Adam West and Burt Ward being characters. Obviously, Burt Ward does return in the Arrowverse crossover Crisis in Infinite Earths in a cameo. But yeah. So in this one, the gang fights Two-Face for the very first time, who's voiced by William Shatner of all people. And again, just like with the previous film, it has cast members that look much older than the characters that they're playing as, so that's a little bit distracting, but it's still fun and so forth. Kind of sad that this is the last time we'll ever see an Adam West kind of thing on screen, but it is what it is. So I'm going to give Batman vs Two-Face, because I did actually quite enjoy it more, a 8 out of 10. Bringing us on to the Telltale series, which I actually nearly forgot about, because the Telltale games are just so... There's just so many of them that it's kind of hard to that it's kind of hard to remember what they all are. But yes, before Telltale went out of business, they did do 2 Batman games, which I'll talk about now. Sorry, my throat's just been a bit funny. So the first Telltale game is basically what you expect it to be. It's basically trying to do another version of, well, actually no, it's not really an origin story of Batman, but it basically talks about Batman during his second year of crime fighting once again. This time, crime families are trying to take over Gotham, and then there's Penguin trying to do Penguin stuff. Harvey Dent is slowly but steadily turning into Two-Face, but it's up to you if you want him to actually properly be Two-Face or not. Yeah, it's a very choice-driven game, and as you'd expect it to be. And Troy Baker's back voicing Bruce Wayne and Batman, and this time he tries to do two distinct voices for them both. But yeah, it's a very choice-driven game, as you'd expect it to be, with some choices working and some choices not working as well. And I'll be honest, it kind of feels like Telltale want you to do choices that are not like traditional methods. And if you're so familiar with everything that's traditional to do with Batman, you want to do that, but they kind of keep trying to encourage you not to do it in that way. But yeah, it is what it is. So I'm gonna give the first Telltale game a 7 out of 10. So the second one's a bit more interesting because this time round Batman is forced to work alongside Amanda Waller, and eventually has to infiltrate himself with a group of villains led by Harley Quinn, and it's basically a group of well-known villains as well. Joker's in there too, and it once again tries to force you to make decisions that are not like through traditional methods. Like there's one point where you can choose between whether you want to help, where you want to encourage Joker to be more manipulative and be more the traditional Joker, or be himself and be a different Joker. and then there's another one where you have to make a decision as to whether you want to keep Alfred or not, and it's implied that you give up Batman once you've decided to keep Alfred. And then Lucius Fox has a daughter in this one as well. So I guess in a way it does do something different to the mythos of Batman, but if you love the traditional methods, you're going to struggle with this game, and if you're not too bothered about the traditional methods, then you'll probably find this game okay. So I'm going to give this game pretty much the same rating, or rating, a 7 out of 10. Which brings us on to the Black and White series, which is basically a series of motion comics. For those who don't know, motion comics are basically short films that are basically taking something from a panel of comics and trying to sort of give them some slight movements with some voice acting and music and sound effects and everything. You can basically see it as sort of like an audio adventure, if nothing else. So yeah. So I'm gonna give, and I don't remember them too well while I was doing research for this video, so I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Next is Gotham Gaslight, which is as you'd expect it to be. It's basically a Batman story set during industrial times with Jack the Ripper being around, and basically it's down to Batman to find out who Jack the Ripper is and take him down. And it's one of those films that has the most surprising twist of who Jack the Ripper is, because it's a character that you'd least expect to be Jack the Ripper, which I think was a great twist. And so yeah, I definitely did like it on that front, and it's definitely got a good unique style to it as well, and it's definitely a very different Batman to what we're used to, so I really did like it. So Gotham by Gaslight I'm going to give a 9 out of 10 just because of how different and original it is in some sense of the word, even though I know it's based on a comic of the same name. Then another Japanese company, I forget the name, decided to do their own version of Batman, which is time called Batman Ninja. So in this one, Gorilla Grodd, who's traditionally a Flash villain, arrives in Gotham with the intent to sell something to Batman villains, but in actual fact, he just wants to take over Gotham with a machine of his by going in the past. And his plan backfires because not only does he send himself in the past, but also various villains and Batman himself and his allies into the past, and they all end up in feudal Japan. Batman being the last person to arrive, with everyone else having already established themselves. So Joker's taken over a thing, Gorilla Grodd's taken over a thing, Two-Face has taken over things, Deathstroke and the rest of them have all taken over things, and it all leads to this big fight between all these different temples that end up becoming these giant robot things. It's kind of like a Power Rangers kind of story, but with Batman instead of the actual Power Rangers. But you know, I did kind of enjoy it, and I thought it was good fun. The only thing that does make it not good for me is the sort of dubbing of the English dub, because as some of us know, when you have traditional animation, English dubbing is pretty easy and straightforward. But when it's like 3D animation like this one, trying to dub it can be a little bit distracting because it's not as easy to try and mimic the lines that are said. And I know with this particular film, there were actually 2 scripts of it, one for the Japanese one and one for the English one. So it means that there's 2 different versions of the film. But overall, I thought it was good, and for the few times they did have sort of traditional 2D animation, which was not very much, it works well. But for the rest of the 3D animation, it's a little distracting dubbing. But it's not often that you see all these Batman villains trying to fight each other with giant robots and then become this one big massive robot that Batman has to fight with the power of monkeys and bats. So yeah, but yeah, I enjoyed it, so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So then we come to the prequel to Under the Red Hood, which is Death in the Family. So this is an interactive Batman film. Interactive in the sense that you have to buy the DVD or Blu-ray, so you can basically make choices as to how you want the film to go. So in this sense, you can basically choose how you want it to go. You can either have it play out like in the traditional way from the comics, or you can just do your own version and see what happens, where Robin survives and all stuff happens. But yeah, it's one of those stories that you're better off buying the disc, the physical media version, over buying the digital version, because apparently for some reason on the digital version you don't have the options to change the storylines or whatever. It's just you start with one and that's it. You can't do it, which is weird, because I know Netflix have that ability to basically let you choose what happens with their interactive stories. I do remember the Black Mirror one very well. But yeah, it still follows the same animation style, it's still the same actors and everything, and it's basically what you expect it to be. Either you want it the traditional way or your own way. But it's nice to have a sort of interactive story nonetheless, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 on that front. I'm just going to have another drink again. And another reminder, right, we're nearly towards the end. There's still quite a lot more to get through, but we're nearly towards the end, so thank you for sticking with me for this long so far if you have. And remember to subscribe if you want to see more. And again, I usually don't do vlogs this long, but I'm doing it long this time because there's just so many Batman stuff to get through. So yeah. But anyway, next is DC Showcase Catwoman, which is part of a series of short films known as DC Showcase, which are short films based on different characters that are basically continuations of their character arcs from different things, or are based on characters that are lesser known compared to other things. And in this one, it continues Catwoman's story from where it left off in year 1, as you'd expect it to be. It's okay for what it is, so I'm going to give it and I'm not going to talk about it too much because I don't remember it all that well, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And then there's Catwoman Hunted, which is the very first feature-length animated film starring Catwoman. I, again, don't remember it too well, but I remember liking it, and I think, and I believe, and I'm not sure 100% on this, but I think it was set in the either the Tomorrowverse or the other cinematic universe, the DC animated movie universe. But either way, still a good film, from what I remember, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 as well. Next, we have a crossover film, Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's basically the crossover that no one wanted, but we got anyway, and it's actually a crossover that does well as a crossover. It does exactly what you think it does. So Shredder teams up with Ra's al Ghul, trying to create this formula using mutagen and this other formula that Ra's al Ghul has, and together with the Foot Clan and the League of Assassins, they work together to take over Gotham and also try and defeat Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and their respective allies. So yeah, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arrive. They are at odds with Batman to begin with, but they then work together, eventually fighting the various Batman villains in different animal forms, as you'd expect it to go. And yeah, it is very good fun. One of the best crossovers I've ever seen, even though it's one that no one really asked for, but we got anyway. And I know it was from the comics as well. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I enjoyed it that much. Not perfect, but I did enjoy it that much. And I look forward to seeing if we get a sequel, because it did imply at the end that there may be a sequel. So yeah. So next up is Pennyworth. So this is another TV show which is, as you'd expect, focused on the character of Pennyworth, who I forget who plays him in this series, but it's basically an origin story for Pennyworth that is something that's not really talked about in the comics much, or if it is, it's not talked about very much. But it basically talks about him during his time as a British spy and how he sort of got himself caught up with Thomas and Martha Wayne. I only ever seen one season of it, but I do remember liking it. And to watch it, you have to subscribe to this weird streaming service, which I think is no longer a thing anymore. Because even though we do get all the popular streaming services here, there's some that we don't get that we have. And to watch certain shows, you have to subscribe to this unusual one. But anyway, I enjoyed watching Pennyworth, the first season anyway, and it has Paloma Faith in it as well, who plays a villain who's interesting. I think I did watch maybe like snippets of the second season, but I don't remember. So yeah, but anyway, it's meant to be a prequel to Gotham as well, so it's set in that particular universe. So yeah, so I'm gonna give Pennyworth a 9 out of 10 because I did enjoy it very much. Next up is another show which is set in the Arrowverse called Batwoman. So this one I thought was a very odd show because it was set up to have, I think her name is Ruby Rose, but I could be wrong about that, portraying the cousin of Bruce Wayne, and basically Batwoman, who becomes the new protector of Gotham. And because of COVID and other reasons, the first season ended kind of prematurely and didn't really resolve any storylines. And then by the time we got to the second season, it's implied that we get told that Batwoman was killed and this new Batwoman has to take over for reasons. And yeah, it kind of gets messy and so forth with everything. So yeah, so Batwoman started off okay, but then just ended up being a mess, and it could have been so much more. But yeah, it is what it is. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Next is The Batman. So this time it's a film, not the show, not to be confused. Robert Pattinson plays Batman this time, and it's basically the first of Matt Reeves' Batman-focused cinematic universe. So in the film, Batman is in his kind of second or third year of being Batman, and he is kind of not feeling that great about things and so forth, and he has Andy Serkis as Alfred. And a character that claims to be the Riddler, I can't remember if it is actually the Riddler or not, basically causes chaos in Gotham, and it's up to Batman to stop him, and it's basically as you'd expect it to be, with its own sort of unique story, its own design and everything. And you know, it's a much more grounded Batman, and I do kind of like it when Batman's a bit more grounded in a way. So yeah, it's a long film though, and it's definitely got some intense moments and scary moments as well, as you'd expect. But yeah, I liked it, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And it had its own TV series that was focused on the Penguin, which is played by whoever the guy's name is. I know it's an Irish guy, and I'll leave it in the edit. I forgot. I'm drawing a blank. I've been talking so much that I've forgotten who people are. But anyway, so this series is what you expect it to be. It's basically focused on Penguin's rise to power and all the things he has to deal with, and it's not like Gotham where it's like focused on that and other things. It's actually strictly focused on Penguin and his rise to power, and it's pretty much a much more chilled, a much more slower pace than Gotham was. It takes its time with establishing his rise to power as well, and it's very much focused on Penguin and all the people that he's associated with, and it kind of ends how you expect it to end and everything. But it's a very, very well done film. So yeah, so I'm gonna get series. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I'm just gonna have another drink. So originally Warner Brothers Montreal were going to make another Arkham game, but eventually they decided to retool the game that they were working on, and it was going to be focused on Batman's allies trying to protect Gotham after Batman got killed at the end of Arkham Knights. But in the end, the game ended up becoming Gotham Knights and became its own separate thing. So in this game, Batman's dead, so Batman's allies, which includes Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, and Batgirl, have to work together to protect Gotham in Batman's absence, and they have to deal with all these different people that are trying to do stuff to Gotham. And it's an online game. I don't really like it very much. It's got a nice soundtrack, but it's not that good of a game, I'll be honest. And the only decent thing I actually liked about it was the fact that I can mod characters to look like they're not wearing much, because that's just something I like. Because let's be honest, Nightwing looks handsome in this game, to be fair. So yeah, so Gotham Knights, I'm just gonna give it a 5 out of 10. It could have been so much more, but it ended up just being what it was. So yeah. And then came Harley Quinn, which is an animated series focused on Harley Quinn, and it's basically what you'd expect it to be. It's Harley Quinn just trying to get over the fact that she's no longer going out with Joker, and she ends up going out with Poison Ivy, and it has a lesbian storyline with sex scenes and everything and all sorts. And Batman's still about there as well, but it's kind of at the point where he just doesn't care about things anymore. And yeah, it is what it is. But I do like it. I think it's a very funny animated series, and one that's definitely very ballsy in what it attempts to do with and everything and so forth. And again, it was another series that I got introduced to by Rule 34 and DeviantArt for reasons. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 because I enjoy it. Next is Soul of the Dragon. So this is a and I'm just gonna have another drink, so I'm running out of things. So this is a film, which is basically a kind of a fun film that's trying to basically be a combination of Batman with a Bruce Lee style kind of film, and it's basically exactly what that is. Exactly what you think it is. So kind of like a 70s or 80s fighting film with kung fu and everything, and this sort of things happen and so forth. And I like the design of characters. I like how Batman's portrayed in this thing, and I know it's an original story. It's not actually based on something, which is great. There's not much originality these days, and I think it's great that we finally saw something like that. So I'm gonna give Soul of the Dragon a 9 out of 10 because I really did enjoy it. So next is another two-part Batman story, but it was merged into one film called Long Halloween, which is pretty much based on the comic book of the same name, in which Batman has to deal with Calendar Man, has to deal with a character called Two-Face, who becomes Two-Face in this story. And it's basically a long Halloween, implied that it starts off for Halloween and ends on Halloween with events that happen in between. And yeah, it's set in the Tomorrowverse, and it's the first Batman film that's part of the Tomorrowverse, and it's pretty much as you expect it to be, and it's pretty good fun. A good film, and definitely well fleshed out and everything. So yeah, so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So next is The Dream That Came to Gotham, and I don't really remember if this was set in the Tomorrowverse or not. And I'll be honest, even though I know it's meant to be based on another comic book, I honestly don't really remember it that well. But I remember it being okay for what it was, and definitely sort of interesting, and portrays Batman in a different kind of light in a way. So I'm gonna give it, based on what I remember of it, a 7 out of 10. Then comes the sequel to Batman Ninja called Ninja vs. Yakuza League, which is basically what you might think it is. It's Batman going up against a villainous version of the Justice League, although it's a villainous version of the Justice League that we see nowadays, where Jessica Cruz is part of the Justice League. And all these members of the Yakuza League are basically enemies that are part of all these different family clans, and they all work together to try and basically get rid of Batman from being a constant pest. And Rachel Gould gets involved in the situation, and Batman and his allies have to work together to stop Rachel Gould. They also get an ally in the form of Wonder Woman as well, just like in the Suicide Squad game, who unintentionally helps the Suicide Squad. So yeah, so I'm gonna give Ninja vs Yakuza League an 8 out of 10 because it's not as epic as the first Batman Ninja game, and again it does Ninja film, and again it does sort of feel like it's trying to match the voices and so, but doesn't quite do a good job there. So yeah. So next is a film that I didn't actually know existed until quite recently. Drink. Which is called Merry Little Batman, which is, as you'd expect, to be a Christmas film, which is a Batman film, and it's kind of like a sort of sweet, kind of funny kind of film that's kind of designed to look like it's made from childhood drawings, similar with Batman having a very similar to the Crimson Chin in Fairly Odd Parents, and it's a nice Batman. It's not a brutal Batman. He's actually a nice Batman. But anyway. So Damian Wayne is in this film, and this time Damian Wayne is actually not too brutal, not too moody like he's traditionally known as. He's desperate to become the new Batman, but Batman doesn't want him to do anything, and he does things in the Wayne manner, and Batman eventually has to sort of relinquish him of his belt and everything. But when these thieves come in to try and steal stuff, this new Damian Wayne decides to become the new Batman and kills and gets rid of these criminals Home Alone style, and then eventually has to deal with the Joker and his allies, who all look very very different and very sort of British looking, which is unusual, but it is what it is. So yeah, Merry Little Batman. It's a fun film, quite a very sweet film, and one that's I think a lot of people are going to miss because it's on Prime Video. But anyway, it is what it is. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. So next is the latest Bruce Timm Batman series called The Cape Crusader. And this one was produced by Matt Reeves, who created the Batman film universe, and J.J. Abrams, who I think was meant to be working on a Superman thing, but is otherwise has nothing to do with Batman. And it's basically a different version of the animated series, but with a more dark and mature tone, but still trying to maintain a sort of family friendliness of it or whatever. But I wouldn't say it's family friendly, to be perfectly honest with you. And it kind of, each episode is focused on Batman taking on a different villain, and I know a lot of people have said their piece about a female penguin. Honestly, I think a female penguin works, in my opinion. It's a different kind of penguin, but, you know, it still works to me. Harley Quinn's also different this time around as well, but I'm fine with that. Honestly, I actually kind of like this show more than most people probably would, and it's definitely meant to resemble the sort of look and feel of the animated series, but does its own thing and kind of sort of does things a little differently with its characters, like making out that Harley Quinn is actually not sort of Joker focused, and instead is her own villain. Harvey Bullock, who's usually traditionally known as a bad cop, but not that bad really. This time he's actually a bad cop and stays as a bad cop, with some vulnerabilities. Barbara Gordon is also an assistant, is also a sort of assistant district attorney kind of character. You've got Jim Gordon's still Jim Gordon. Alfred and Batman's relationship is a bit sort of stiff in this one, but we've seen that before previously, so that's nothing new there. And Montoya, who's like a police person, is made out to be a lesbian in this one, but it's not. They don't make a huge deal of it. She goes on a date with Harley Quinn, they kiss, and then that's the end of that. So yeah, but yeah, overall, the Cape Crusader series is a good series. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes because it did kind of leave things sort of open-ended. But yeah, I thought it was a good series. I don't think it deserved the hate that it got just because of that one episode with Penguin. But yeah, so I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10 because I know some things don't quite work for me, but you know, it's okay for what it was. Excuse me. So yeah. So next is Arkham Shadow, which is the second VR Batman game, and definitely a much better VR Batman game because you can actually move around. You're not having to shift into another part, but it's set not long after Arkham Origins, in which Batman has to take on the Rat King. And for the limited amount of time I played it, because I did get stuck at one point, it's good. You basically get to use the controllers to basically go down and grab the gadgets and throw them and use them or whatever. And you're having to do all sorts of things. And it's basically as Arkham as you can get. You got the vent crawling. You can fight characters with combos and everything with the counters and so forth. I didn't quite get as far as the sort of Predator mode, if there is a Predator mode in the game. But yeah, it's good. It was good, much better than the Batman VR experience previously. It's not perfect though, but I did enjoy it. Enjoy the limited amount of time I played it, so I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. And next is Bat Wheels. So this show I didn't actually know that much about. I knew it existed and it was on Netflix, so I watched it, and it's as you'd expect it to be. It's basically what would happen if all of Batman's vehicles ended up looking like anthropomorphic vehicles, and it's basically gives you cars, but in the Batman universe, even though there's actual human cuts in there as well. And to begin with, I kind of thought I wouldn't enjoy it because it looked like one of those shows that's aimed for younger children in mind, and it definitely looks like the sort of show that's aimed for younger children in mind. But it does sort of have things for adults as well. Like I know there was like one episode where they had the Adam West Batmobile come out, and it's actually Adam West saying his lines. And then there's like other things that go on in it as well. And it's not really that educational, though it does sort of try and tell stories about teamwork and so forth, which I do kind of like. So yeah, but yeah, I'm not the right audience for it, but I get what they're trying to do with it, so I'm gonna give it I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. So now onto a few audio dramas, and the first of these is the Audio Adventures, which is basically just a collection of Batman stories that I think some of them are trying to sort of intertwine with one another, but it's basically what you expect them to be. It's basically a bunch of 30 or so minute audio adventures with Batman and co, and some of them are funny, some of them are entertaining, some of them are dark and brooding, but overall you get what you get with them. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Then we have Batman Unburied, which is set in its own universe, and in this universe, Bruce Wayne is a doctor instead of a rich billionaire. And this new villain called the Harvester arrives in Gotham to terrorize it, and Dr. Wayne has to become Batman to deal with that and other villains. It did have a second season, which, as I recall when I was listening to it, deals with the aftermath, but yeah, I don't really remember much from that one because I was listening to that while listening to other things as well at the same time, because I was trying to multitask. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Set in that same universe is another audio drama called The Riddler: Secrets in the Dark, which you could probably guess focuses on the Riddler and what he's been doing since the ending of the first season of Unburied, with all the different shenanigans of famine, swearing and everything and all sorts. So gonna give that a 8 out of 10 because I enjoyed that. Harley Quinn and the Joker: Sound Mind, so another one that's on Spotify, and this one is pretty much basically just talking about an unexplained time where Harley Quinn was still Harleen Quinzel, being a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, and basically just talks about her time with the Joker before she becomes crazy and having these various points with Joker and other Arkham inmates. Is basically what you expect it to be. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, and I think I've covered everything apart from one more thing, because there's obviously so much that I can watch, read, play and so forth that I can't really do everything. Obviously, I don't really review comic books on this channel because there are just so many comic books out there, and there's so much detail and everything that it would be impossible to just do a video on that because there's just so many. I'll just be here forever talking about them. But there's loads of other YouTubers that do that anyway. But anyway, last thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to end this video, is the Unmasked exhibition, which is an exhibition I went to with one of my friends. It was in London for a while, and I know it was in another place too, and it's basically a kind of sort of escape room to begin with. We have to figure out how to escape Wayne Manor, and then you get into a bit where you get to see all the different costumes, vehicles and everything. You get photo opportunities and so forth, and then you get into a bit where you get to enter the minds of different Arkham Asylum inmates and see all the different things going on. So there's a room that's very much Joker, a room that's very much Poison Ivy, and the Riddler room as well. And then eventually, at the end of it, you get to play Lego Batman games if you want to, do another photo opportunity if you want to, and then go to gift shop and leave. It's basically a fun little experience. It's not a very long Batman attraction, but it's a good attraction for what it was. It did everything you expected to do, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And that is it. I'm not going to talk about anything else to do with Batman or related characters. Anything else I want to talk about to do with Batman, I'll do in a later video. But yeah, that is everything I want to talk about with Batman today. Thank you all so much for sticking with me to the end of it. I know it's a very long-winded video, but I wanted to get as much Batman stuff done as I could, and I'm so relieved that it's over, because this has been the bane of my existence for the last week or so, trying to get it all done and everything. So yeah, that is it for this Let's Talk, and it's been a very long Let's Talk. And if you've seen, played, or heard any of these things, love to hear what you think about them. So draw your conclusions in the comments. Yeah, and these vlogs won't be as long next time. It's just as long this time because there's just so much Batman to talk about. So thank you for sticking around with me, and yeah, just thank you so much for watching. Like, share, comment and subscribe if you can, please. Those of you new to the channel, I do vlogs like this talking about all sorts of different things, usually not this long, but it had to be this long because there was just so much to talk about. I also do gameplay videos where it's just straight gameplay, nothing else, but it's still obviously me playing. Let's play videos where I have my camera and microphone on, or just my microphone on, playing games. And I also do games with my friends as well, so do check those out too. And I also do occasional shorts as well. See you in the next one. Peace to you all. And remember, if someone's trying to mug you and steal your pearls or whatever, try and deal with that guy quickly, sooner than later, otherwise you're gonna have death on your hands. And remember, don't always use the excuse that you're Batman for every reason. That's because, you know, that's just so overrated. Like, because I'm Batman. Yeah, just don't do that, because yeah, we know Batman's great and everything, but he's not. But you know, he's not a perfect superhero, but he's definitely very relatable as well. And remember, if the bat signal shines in the sky, it probably means someone is in trouble or whatever, so go to it. So yeah, alright. Toodles.